You wrote a very interesting article in Slate comparing the inaction on one side in terms of not stopping the protests at the clinics, but the very swift action calling for an end to the protests at the homes of the Supreme Court justices. Talk a little bit about that, because there does seem to be several layers of hypocrisy potentially built into, juxtaposing those two situations.
Oh, yeah. It's a whole onion layer dip of layers happening with that. So, on its face, when the leaked ruling came out and we read it, it was obviously horrifying in its scope, not just overturning Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the 1992 ruling that upheld a person's constitutional right to an abortion, but basically showing their entire roadmap for how this court is going to dismantle the right to privacy and everything that falls under it. People were understandably horrified and outraged. That's an entirely unpopular and I would argue unconstitutional and undemocratic viewpoint. And so this woman actually has been doing this in her own community. She lives in the same neighborhood as Justice Brett Kavanaugh in Washington, D.C., and she's been quietly holding vigil outside his house for the past few months, really since the oral arguments in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health, which is this case that was held in January. And suddenly people wanted to join her. Lots of people wanted to join her. There are peaceful protesters that are sitting in this space. They are not on his lawn. They are not in his yard, but saying, if you're going to do this, then we're going to express our outrage. And all of a sudden, all of these calls of this is uncivilized, this is absolutely unacceptable to target a Supreme Court justice in this way. I absolutely agree. No one should be targeting them for violence. That is not what anyone is talking about here. And Susan Collins, the senator from Maine, the Republican senator from Maine, whose support for Kavanaugh pushed him over the edge, some lovely Mainer wrote in chalk, the nicest protest message I've ever heard, which was, please, Susie, don't do it. Support abortion rights. Something to that effect. And she called the police. What we're seeing here is when those in power are actually challenged on what they're doing, especially when it's unpopular and particularly when it's about to oppress someone, the only way they can claim the high ground is to say, that's an uncivilized way. I don't think there's any sort of civilized way for someone to say, please get your boot off of my neck.